Alright, in this video we're going to go over the most basics of accounts payable, which is entering a bill. Okay, so in QuickBooks, I know on my screen right here I have some purchase orders, receive, inventory, etc. Right? If I had purchase orders turned off, I would just see this enter bills area. So I'm going to go in to enter bills. You can get to the same place, right? Vendors, enter bills. In the vendor center, you can see new transaction, enter bill. I'm going to go through the transaction first, and then we'll talk about the information up top here. So first of all, it is a bill, so I want to make sure that bill is chosen. That's going to be the default. The cursor starts for me, similar to an invoice, right? It starts for me in a place that I want to start, which is in the vendor name. So first I'm going to look at my bill that I have received in and type in the vendor that I received from. So we're going to go ahead and say Software Consultants Inc., right? Now it will pre-fill, it's a setting for me if I want it to pre-fill in transactions. What it's basically doing is it's remembering what I did last time on my details down here when I purchased from this vendor. Okay, so that's a preference if you want to turn that off. This date is very important. This date is going to be, if you're on an accrual basis, which again, check out future videos about accrual versus a cash basis, but this date is very important. This is going to be the date, if you're on an accrual basis, that affects your books, right? So I'm going to do this bill for rent. Rent gets posted on the first of every month, on the last of every month, whatever day it is, but you want to make sure that this date is correct. So I'm going to say 12/1. All right. Now again, this isn't necessarily the payment date, right? Because again, accrual basis accounting, you want to make sure that you might pay rent twice in 1 month, right? I might cut the check on 11/1 and then cut the check for December on 11/30. So the cash may have left, but the bills need to be dated appropriately. So on 11/1 and then on 12/1. Okay. When do we enter a bill? A bill's entered when we are going to have a time period between when we put the bill in and when we pay it. Right, so generally bills are entered into the system because we have terms with our vendor. We're going to pay them in 15 days, and 10 days, and 30 days, whatever the terms are. So we enter those bills in the system when we receive them as a reminder, right? Because then the system reminds us these bills are coming due in the future. Okay, so make sure to check out about, how to pay bills. Okay, so reference number 4444, and you can put, ABC if you wanted to in there. The amount due, so total amount due for rent, wouldn't that be nice? $500. Also, in the reference number, there is a preference, just so you're aware too. So you can choose to have it warn you when you hit save. It doesn't warn you at the time of entering the reference number, but if I hit save and there's already a bill in the system for that vendor with that reference number, there is a preference to pop up and warn you. Okay, so amount due 500, and again, I'm just using tab to go through my fields. Bill due date. So the date right now has a default because of my system preferences. My system preferences say default 10 days. Bills are due within 10 days. If I had terms set up with this vendor, okay, so watch set up your vendors area. If I had terms set up with this vendor, it would have filled this in for me, and that bill due date is driven off of these terms. So first it defaults to the system terms. If you have terms in there set up at the vendor level, then it'll default to those, so it'll say your bill's due in 30 days. If for whatever reason the bill due calculation does not work out, you can come in and override it. Okay. If we had any discount terms set up with our vendor, so if we pay them within 10 days, we get a 2% discount. It will fill in for us that discount date, but the bill due date is still going to set in there as 30 days later because that's when it's finally due. Okay, so again, the discount date you cannot edit. Right? It's only driven based on the terms. In the class here, All right, so you can choose a particular class that this falls into. If you set the class up top here, similar to an estimate when you or an invoice, when you put the class on the top row, right, it'll default fill in for you if you have multiple lines on the transaction. All right, in the memo, so this memo, you do have a preference again to print this memo when you print out the pay stubs. But it's a memo for the entire bill. You also can put a memo on the individual lines down below. All right. But this was the one that would print potentially on checks. Okay, so down below we do have an expenses tab and an items tab. In this video, we're just going to talk about expenses. So when we're dealing with the expenses tab, we're pointing this bill straight to a general ledger account code. So if this was for rent, I type in rent, and so what this transaction is going to do is when I hit the save button, it is going to put $500 as an expense to my rent account on 12/1/2020. All right. So in the memo, if I chose to again, I could, obviously this memo doesn't really fit, so I'm just going to leave that one blank. I could put in here December 1 through December 31, 2020. Again, whatever notes are effective for you all to keep track of, what you're actually paying for. We do have the customer and job field here, so we'll explain that again in a future video when we're talking about doing job costing. But for now, right, rent is not associated with the customer job most of the time. It's an overhead expense. The class, and obviously job related, doesn't really apply, so we probably would have chosen overhead costs here. And that's it. So now I have the bill in the system. I can hit the save and close button if I'm done entering bills in. I can hit the save and new button if I want to enter another bill in. And then we have clear if I've done something wrong and I don't want to save it at all. So I'm just going to hit save. Okay. I have the previous and next button up top, find. So if I need to find a particular reference number for a bill, amount, etc., I can do new, save. I do have the void feature here. I do recommend voiding rather than deleting transactions. It just helps us keep a record of what's going on. Obviously if it was entered completely in error, delete's okay. I do like in Enterprise how you can choose whether or not people can edit a transaction, right, which would allow them to avoid it, or if they can delete a transaction. Now again, deleted transactions would show up right in the audit trail under our voided deleted transactions or on the audit trail report, but still I prefer void. You can create a copy, so if this is a bill, right, that we have every month and I don't want to have to retype everything in, I could just go in, create a copy of this bill, date it, now it's January 2021. The reference number is 4445 ABC. The amount due, everything else is the same, so probably I would want to change that memo down here. So again, sometimes these memos, right, you don't want to put too much stuff in here that's repetitive, because then doing things that make your job easier, like creating copies, because January 1 through January 31, we pretty much know, right? Rent, we paid on the first of the month. We know what period it's for. So anyway, just be aware with things that you put on here that are not important data. You can memorize this transaction. So we do have videos on this, but again, this is where if you want it to automatically be entered every month, the bill gets entered automatically for you. That's a very effective way to do this. We can print the bill out if we needed to. We can attach copies, so if the vendor sent us a copy of the PDF for the bill, I can attach that right into the system here. That's great for future access, future use. If you're going, you have internal audits or anything like that, or you need to provide information to, board members or your managers or anything like that, you can always pull up and open up those attachments to show why we entered this bill. If we were using POs, we could select POs. We could enter from time if this was for vendors. You could clear split, so if you didn't want multiple lines in here. Recalculate, I kind of like this one. So 450, and let's say we split it, 6650, and then $50 for whatever reason was going to a different department. or maybe $75, right? Because then I wouldn't have to recalculate. So notice how right here on the expenses tab, it calculates for me what I've done on the different items, right? The different lines down below here, even though the amount due is $500. So if I tried to save this, it would give me a warning. It would say, hey, you said that this bill is for $500, but your lines don't add up to $500. Okay. So this recalculate button just kind of helps. It'll force whatever amounts you put down below up to the amount due up here. But I do like starting with putting the amount due here, especially if you're going to break out the lines down below, because it helps us keep on track. Like, oh, I did my math wrong. It's supposed to be $50, right? And then I say save, and it'll let me go through that transaction. Okay. If you have a lot of bills in the system, I find the easiest way, if you have a lot of bills in the system and you're going to pay one bill, right? If you go into the pay bills area, which you'll see a video on that in just a minute, but if you go into the pay bills area, it's it can be kind of difficult to navigate through all the bills that are in your system. So sometimes I like to find the bill that I want to pay, and then I just click pay bill here. And what that does is it actually takes me to my pay bills and checks off that one transaction. So sometimes it's faster to pay the bill by opening up the bill first and hitting that pay bill, since I'm just paying this one, than it is trying to navigate through the pay bills area. So I think that that's a really important button up top. Okay. And then of course we have some reports that are important for bills. Transaction history journal. Transaction journal shows us behind the scenes what's happening. Items listing, open POs, vendor balance detail, etc. And then of course we have the search feature, which will allow us to search within this transaction, right? So if I'm looking for Jan, okay, it's not going to work. Search. All right, well that one didn't work. I'm looking for rent. Search. No. Okay. Well, it's supposed to search within the transaction. I think it's more effective. I think it's for the items tab that search is happening. So we'll check that out in the next video. Enter items, enter bills by items and expenses. Okay. I know it's a lot of information, but that's how you enter a bill. Hopefully once you get your process down, entering bills will take you 5 seconds, 10 seconds per bill. That would be the goal. And especially if you're using the purchase orders, it should be a lot faster to enter those bills in. But it should be simple once you have it all set up and you understand what you're doing. So go ahead and enter all your bills.